Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to read Awaken Maid for Spike. Chapter 2, Saturday morning. Without further ado, let's hop right into it. Saturday morning. A silver light fell upon the form of sleeping purple and green dragon. His tail was tucked between his legs, and he was holding the spaded end in his arms, cuddling it. Rarity, you're so beautiful, and your hair smells so nice, he whispered lovingly to his tail. A white hand shook him awake gently. Master, it's time to wake up. Rarity, I don't want to get up, he mumbled, hardly awake. I was having the greatest dream about Rarity. Spike's eyes shut open and he jumped backwards, landing his back against the headboard. He took a glance at the mare he loved, and then at the tail still held protectively in his hands. He released his tail and quickly forced it back between his legs. A blush crept on his face. It was not the most masculine position to be caught in. Rarity giggled gently, covering her mouth with her hand. You're so cute, Master. You'll be happy to know I already got your clothes ready. They're waiting in the bathroom for you. Spike took a moment to take in the beautiful unicorn. She was gorgeous, stunning, and perfect, so nothing out of the ordinary, except she was still wearing her maid outfit from yesterday. Thanks, Rarity. My pleasure, Master. But suddenly faced Spike as he went to get off the bed. His feet touching the floor, she was standing directly in front of him as her hands gripped the hem of her dress. I made sure to follow your order and not put on any panties. She smiled sheepishly and innocently as she lifted her skirt up, reeling herself to her love. Her cheeks flushed red as she watched his do the same. Unlike before, this was a very obviously deliberate and close-up, intimate view of her. Spike was now face to waist with Rarity. His eyes took in the gentle, soft white fur on her waist, hips, and legs. Next, his eyes fell on a small tuft of perfectly taken care of purple hair right above the last of her revealed form. There in front of his eyes sat her marehood. The snow-colored fur ended where the lips met and soft heel flesh glistened, revealing itself in small hints. His head attempted to move of its own accord to taste the mesmerizing opening before his mind kicked in and stopped it. He was not sure how long they were there frozen in that position, but he knew it was much longer than was necessary to reveal she was not wearing any underwear. Very good. I'll follow any order you give me, Master. She held her skirt another second longer, allowing him one last look. Before dropping it, she stared into his eyes for a moment, practically feeling the hunger coming from them. She pressed her legs together, attempting to stop herself from soaking the floor right then and there. Part of her knew what she was doing was not acceptable, but the larger part did not care. She needed this and deserved it. She started out of the room. You weren't supposed to wear a bra either. Spike sat there wondering where that voice that sounded an awful lot like his had come from. Correct, Master, Rarity said, turning back around. Show me. Wait a minute, that came out of his mouth? He had just ordered Rarity to show him her breasts. What the hell's wrong with him? Why could he not take his eyes off her hands, now wrapped around the color of her outfit? Rarity once again felt the rise of excitement and embarrassment as Spike ordered her to show him her bare chest. Unlike yesterday, though, this time he knew full well that she would obey his perverse demand. Her heart fluttered in anticipation as she tugged down on the cloth, causing her breasts to bounce a little as they came free from the constricting cloth. She could feel how hard and stiff her nipples were, and for an instant her mind mused that she could pop balloons with them. She sat there, hoping he would escalate the situation and demean her further. He swallowed, fighting the urge to make matters worse, unable to take his eyes off her luscious chest and the thought of pinching, pulling, and gently batting those teal. He shook his head, attempting with little success to get rid of the lewd thoughts. Well done. You can put your top back on now, she sighed mentally and lifted the uniform back over herself. It got caught on her nipples, and she pulled forcibly up on the material, causing it to roughly press against them. She gasped lightly at the touch and looked down at the two very obvious tips pressing against the fabric. She left the room feeling a certain dampness running down her legs. Spike was doing a very impressive job of not losing his mind. He was having a very stimulating morning, to say the least. After all, he got off the bed and headed for the bathroom. He needed to clear his mind, and only one thing was going to help him do that: a very, very cold shower. He stepped into the bathroom and went to lock the door behind him. It occurred to him, though, that if Rarity wanted in, she would just use her magic to open it anyways, and so he decided to leave it unlocked. If he wanted to get through his shower without Rarity inviting herself in to help, he would have to be fast. But was that what he really wanted? The thought of those soft, perfectly manicured hands running down his body as he went over hers, making sure to get every cold shower now. He turned the faucet all the way to cold, stripped, and jumped in. He tried to purify his mind as the water washed over him. One particular memory refused to yield to the ice-cold washing over his body, his inner flame battling against it to maintain his body temperature. The dream of the beautiful unicorn between his legs, doing things to him he had only imagined. However, it felt way too good to actually be a dream. No, only reality sufficed that kind of pleasure. He cursed the fire in his chest that prevented the water from doing its job. Maybe if he looked at this objectively, a lifetime of living with Twilight and her normally insane but completely logical to a fault mannerisms had taught him all he needed. First off, Rarity had felt guilty that thanks to Twilight and dressed up as a maid to serve him. Next, he had made her strip out of her lingerie and she had gotten aroused by it. After that, she prepared dinner and used it as a way to make out with him, which he really enjoyed. During that time, she had dropped a gem and bent over to pick it up, giving him an unobstructed view of her more personal areas. Finally, he had gone to bed, except that she caught him during his own personal moment and decided to assist. She had even taken those beautiful fingers and tasted her own pleasure before passionately kissing him and giving him a taste. Those sweet, soft lips meeting his as her tongue. Cold water. Stop me now, please. Spike smacked his head into the wall in an attempt to get back on track. Now, all he needed was to put everything together and get some answers. Rarity and he had certainly crossed the line, and he had started it all in an attempt to stop things from getting weird. He laughed at their irony. Out of damn good that did. Still, the line had been crossed, and unlike he expected, things had not gone to hell. In fact, everything seemed to be going better than he would have dared to imagine. Rarity seemed to enjoy being bossed around in rather compromising ways. That did not make much sense though. Rarity always wanted to be treated like a lady. Maybe she just enjoyed something different intimately. You would have to be blind to miss how perky as she had been this morning after he had offered her top off. And he had not missed the gasp nor wetness going down her thigh either. What really mattered to him was if he was merely some lustful game, or if she was only doing it and enjoying all of this because she had feelings for him. He got out of the shower and toweled off while looking into a mirror above the sink. Could she really love him? And if so, did she want him to take advantage of the situation for both of their pleasures? He knew one thing for sure, he would never understand mares. Downstairs in the kitchen, Rarity prepared a few eggs for breakfast while humming a sweet little tune. She had considered joining Spike for his shower, but because of their late night activities, both of them had slept in. This had given her little time to prepare for her plans for the two of them today. And besides, with the way things had happened so fast, she figured Spike could use a little time to himself to sort things out. She had come up with a few ideas for the rest of the weekend. Last night, while dozing to sleep in her freshly stained sheets, some of them she had decided were a bit too extravagant for the moment. No, she needed something that she could begin, but would put all the power in his hands to start off with. A stroke of genius and a secretive purchase from the recently opened the hot sauce jar store had provided her with the perfect answer. She could barely contain her excitement. Spike walked down the stairs and was led by the scent of breakfast to the kitchen. Hey Rarity, what smells so good? Rarity finished setting the table as he asked, Breakfast. I made eggs, toast, and freshly squeezed orange juice. I remember your favorite was sunny side up, master. It smells great, thanks. Spike took his seat across from her. You're welcome, master. Rarity really loved how, even under the current circumstances, Spike's manners remained impeccable. The two ate their breakfast in peace, with Spike occasionally glancing over at Rarity before turning away as she intently stared at him with those beautiful sapphire-colored eyes, with that warm smile that melted his heart. When they were done, Rarity cleared the table and wiped it down. Spike was still sitting in his chair watching the mirror of his dreams work. He had been surprised by the quiet meal. That was delicious, Rarity. You're a superb cook. That's very kind of you, master. Rarity grabbed something out of one of the drawers and walked over to Spike. I've been thinking, if you needed me for something and I was in another room, the only way for you to contact me would be to call me, and I might not hear you, so I came up with a solution. Spike felt two small objects objects placed in his hands, but before he could inspect them, Rarity had climbed up onto the table. On her hands and knees, she crawled towards where she had been sitting earlier and laid her body against the table, while at the same time lifting her uncovered rear up directly in front of Spike's face. She looked back to find him staring at her. Her elegant white face turned red at the shameful display she was putting on. Spike was looking upon a similar scene from dinner last night, except this time a lot closer. With way more detail, he could see the excitement leaking out between her delicate lower lips. He could smell the arousal pouring out of her. It was strong and unique, and he felt as if he could get drunk off of it as he took in a deep breath of her. Her ass was nice and round, but it looked fairly firm at the same time. He could imagine that his hands would sink into it a little, but a nice hard squeeze would meet plenty of resistance. Finally, under her tail sat a small, puckered, teal indent that he could only describe as being both cute and sexy. He brought the two items that had been placed in his hands up to his face and examined them. One was a small purple remote with a button and 3 different settings: slow, medium, and fast. The other object was a small round egg-shaped piece of plastic of the same color. Based on the remote and the fact Spike was not oblivious, he deduced it was a wireless vibrator. Betty watched as Spike looked over her, biting her lip as he took the time to memorize every millimeter of her. When he had smelled her, she had almost came right there, but instead settled for spilling a gracious amount of her own natural lubricant onto the table under her hips. Here she was with her bare ass in the air inches from the face of the Drake she loved. It was so improper, dirty, and degrading, and she loved the shit out of it. She spoke up as he finished inspecting the sex toy. "You can put that in me, and whenever you need something, just turn it on, and I'll be right there." Very effective. Spike still held some doubt, but he could not deny that he wanted to do this. He took the toy and used his long forked tongue to coat it in his saliva. "Okay, use your hands and spread your ass for me." "Yes, master." Rarity's heart skipped a beat as she slid her hands out from under her breasts and moved them towards her rear. She muffled a happy cry from her lips as her fingers sunk into her curves and the flesh rose around them. She spread herself as far as she could, hoping to please her master. She clamped her mouth shut as she felt the toy pressed against her marehood, and rolled gently over it while being slid up and down the entrance. As quickly as the sensation had appeared, it was removed. She went to turn her head as Spike's voice reached her ears. "This is such a dirty idea and toy that it deserves a dirty place to stay." A shiver ran down her spine as the cold plastic covered in his saliva and her juices made contact again, but this time it was aimed higher. It suddenly clicked in her head, the licking, the workover he had given her marehood. It was all to lubricate it so he could put it in her. Spike pushed the wet, sticky vibrator slowly into her ass. He watched as her beautiful teal flesh sucked it in and squeezed down hard on it. Refusing to let it go, he smiled as she screamed at the sudden intrusion and pleasure. An evil thought entered his mind. Might as well make sure it works. And with that, he pressed the button 3 times in rapid succession. Rarity had never even touched herself there before, and the old sensation of having a toy shoved inside suddenly was both incredibly pleasant and fairly uncomfortable. She may have been the first one, and until this weekend only one, to touch herself, but Spike had just become the first to play with her ass. Every little push brought new pleasure and new pain. She could feel her body accepting it and trying to hold it inside of her, but most of all, she could feel his eyes watching her as her lewd body behaved in such a manner. Once it had finally settled all the way inside her tongue had lolled out of her mouth and was dripping onto the table. A few simple words reached her ears, and then she screamed his name as the inside of her ass came alive with unbelievably intense vibrations and a quiet buzzing. Her body pushed further into the table, her hands dug into her curves, leaving red marks, and her back arched, sending her rear further into the air. Euphoria ripped through her body in waves as she sprayed cum all over the recently cleaned table, adding to the puddle of juices that now coated it and dripped onto the floor. Spike smiled as he lowered the setting back to slow and prepared himself to catch her should she collapse. She seemed to be stable enough to leave her now completely soaked marehood in his face. Not that he was complaining. He seemed like such a waste, so he ran his forked tongue over the opening for his effort. He received a happy purr from her and a sweet, salty taste for him. He walked around the table and helped her off gently, letting her sit on his lap in her chair. She regained her sense after a few minutes After a few moments, finding Spike's hands wrapped around her waist and his hot breath on her ear. Rarity, that table was just cleaned. What are you gonna do about it? Spike asked after she had settled down. Rarity was blushing deeply as she stared at the mess she had made. I'm sorry, Master. It was just so good. I'll get a towel and clean it up right away. No, you won't. You're going to clean up this mess you made with your tongue, while I supervise to make sure you got it all. Spike smirked as he wondered what the hell had gotten into him and how far a hole he was digging. As you command, Master. Spike loosened his grip and allowed Rarity to jump off. She set to work on the table, dragging her broad, rough tongue over the wood while making sure not to miss a single drop of her orgasm or wetness. She licked along the edges and lapped up any that had gotten to the floor by dropping to all four. While she worked, enjoying every second of degradation and humiliation, she smiled at the progression of her plan and of the soft, barely audible buzzing coming from beneath her tail. It took every ounce of control to stop herself from making the floor wetter as she enjoyed her work, or else she had be there all day. Spike had taken complete control, and although he still seemed to be holding back, she could not complain. Here she was licking her cum off the floor with a vibrator in her ass in front of the Drake she loved, and she could not be happier. With just a little more pushing, he would be making his own personal. With just a little more pushing, he would be making her his own personal sex slave. She could not wait. She stood up as she finished with the floor. Rarity's legs and thighs were now completely covered in her own juices, and she smelled of sex. Spike was trying hard not to drool as he attempted to piece everything together in his head. Another line had been crossed, but Rarity seemed to be enjoying herself, and he certainly was as well. Still, the doubt remained that he was messing up their chances of a real relationship. He had no idea where half of what he had done even came from, honestly. Rarity licked her lips and looked seductively at Spike. Did I do a good job, Master? Spike got up and walked towards her while he spoke. You did perfectly, so good in fact. Now face to face with her, I think you've earned a reward. He wrapped his arms around her waist and caught her mouth against his. His warm breath filled her mouth as she allowed him access. His long forked tongue seemed to dance around her mouth as it displayed a dexterity she doubted could ever be matched. Her mind drifted on the waves of her happiness as Spike finally kissed her. Spike could taste his new favorite flavor, Rarity. He knew that eventually they would have to stop to breathe, but he took one final liberty. His hands slid lower before slipping under her skirt. He grasped her ass steadily and firmly while being careful not to hurt her with his claws. Rarity gasped into Spike's mouth as she felt his claws dig into her. The sharp appendages bit into her flesh slightly, causing a little pain, mixed with a lot of pleasure, to rock her body. Suddenly, it all stopped as Spike looked down at her. All he noticed was how red her face was. If he had to explain it, it was as if she had been caught doing something very wrong, but at the same time was very innocent. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and he wanted to see more of it. For now, though, he decided to brush a loose strand of hair from her face and behind her ear. Before walking out of the room quietly and calmly, Rarity collapsed onto her knees with her legs splayed behind her. She would have to clean the floor under her again, it seemed. Having a few glasses of water to replenish some fluids would be a good idea as well. She decided, but most importantly, she discovered she really liked having her ass handled. Her fingers and his claws had been magical. She would have to find a way to get more attention for her dirty little rump. A quick glance out the window informed Rarity that it had seemed like an hour at most, had actually taken a lot longer. The sun had finished most of its path along the sky, and in a few short hours would descend beyond the horizon. She still had a lot to prepare. Spike's special dinner for tonight. The end. Alright, that's the end of that chapter. Fuck. I really wish I was Spike right now. Like, fuck me, man. I need to get a girlfriend one of these days. Anyways, guys, thank you all for watching, doing whatever the heck you guys do, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.
100,000 stories have filled my head as I look for the end.